This message comes from Avid Reader Press, publisher of A Flower Traveled in My Blood by Haley Cohen Gilliland, the true story of grandmothers in Argentina searching for their kidnapped grandchildren during a military dictatorship. Available in bookstores and online.
Heads up, this episode contains some salty language. Hey everyone, you're listening to Code Switch. I'm B.A. Parker.
And I'm Gene Demby.
Gene, I don't know about you, but I've been feeling lately like this country is in a constant state of protest.
What do we want? Where do we want it?
Right? You got the No Kings protests, the protests against ICE all over the country, all the protests about Israel and Gaza, the protests about the war in Ukraine. I mean, before that, 2020 was like a conveyor belt of protests. It feels like we're in this constant churn of righteous indignation, protest, lather, rinse, repeat.
But despite the energy going towards these protests, I think a lot of people have been wondering if they're actually achieving anything, including one of our listeners who reached out to us to share some of her concerns.
My name is Katie Hamill, and I'm from Austin, Texas. My husband and I went to the No Kings protest here, and I had been talking to my son about the protest a couple days prior, seeing if he wanted to go, come down with, like, let's go out, let's hold some signs. I was planning to blow bubbles and just be like a happy fairy sprite, which is kind of my jam. And his response was almost immediately, what's the purpose? I don't think protests really do anything. Like, they don't seem to make any difference.
Wait, but Parker, how old is Katie's son?
He's 17. And Katie said he feels frustrated and defeated being a progressive teenager living in the conservative state of Texas. Like, the things he wants are likely just never going to happen.
And I was, gutted first and foremost, but also understandable about where he's coming from.
Katie says for her son, one worry can spiral into another.
We started talking about just his generalized anxiety about the state of the world. And that led us down a path of speaking about AI, and particularly the capacity of AI to create disinformation videos that can be used to foment political violence on a really massive scale that, he's terrified. He's just
he's going
so anxious.
through it.
Oh, yeah, he's in it. All the teenage angst.
Plus, the outward,
yes.
the macro problems of the world.
That's it. It's heavy shit over here right now.
Yeah, because the state of the world is a lot for any of us to process right now. And for a teenager like Katie's son, I mean, I can see how he'd be feeling overwhelmed and standing in the street, blowing bubbles is not going to budge any of these big issues that he's really worried about.
Yeah, and like we were saying, he's not the only one that's questioning whether protests actually make change. It's a question that's been on a lot of people's minds.
I mean, you've been trying to get answers to that question, Parker. So, what did you find? Do they work?
That's what we're going to get into today.
This message comes from Smalls. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Give your cat the food they deserve. To get 60% off your first order and free shipping, head to smalls.com/codeswitch. This message comes from Revenued. Revenued offers fast, flexible funding for businesses, up to $250,000 for the highest revenue category, with approvals in as little as one business day. Funds are made available on demand, and the cost of capital is based on a fixed factor rate applied to the amount you draw. There are no application fees, no draw fees, and no maintenance fees. Apply now at getrevenued.com and be ready for whatever comes next. This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
Hi, it's Catherine Marr, CEO of NPR. Federal funding for public media has been eliminated. That means that the NPR network is moving forward in an uncharted future. But our commitment to you will never waver. Please give today to support the kind of journalism that democracy relies upon. Make your gift at donate.npr.org. Thank you.
I spoke with Professor Gloria J. Brown Marshall. She's a professor of constitutional law and Africana studies at John Jay College, and her book, A Protest History of the United States, explores how people in the U.S. have always organized, from indigenous revolts to union strikes to the 2020 protests after the killing of George Floyd. Rebellion and protest have shaped this country.
We need to know how to do this, and do this meaning protest. And people have said, oh, it's not effective anymore. Nobody does anything with protests. It doesn't really work. And so I wanted to have examples, and I couldn't put everybody's protests in there, but it's got a lot of protests from, the indigenous uprisings and all these different things that people have done, large and small, that I think is necessary for us to understand today to inform our protests today.
Gloria told me that she wanted to write the book because she was seeing a disconnect between the rights we have now and the knowledge we have of the people who fought to achieve those rights.
And they were almost dismissed from history. And I felt that they should be, or at least their efforts and their work should be known. And also I wanted young people to understand that there are protests that have taken place that can inform the protests they're doing today.
This is a perfect segue because I was talking to a listener who lives in Austin, Texas, a mom, and she's trying to persuade her teenage son that protests work because he doesn't think that way. And what would you say to this mom to try to cajole this kid back into action?
Well, depending on the age, they've seen a lot. And they've seen a lot of protests, and yet they see a lot of backsliding. And so they have the right to be cynical. So I think she should really see him as someone who's deservedly cynical based on everything they've seen in their short time period on the planet, but also to realize that protest, even if it's street protest or some other protest, is empowering. And it allows them to lift that weight off of their shoulders and be a part of something that's social, that sense of empowerment that comes with being a part of something greater than yourself.
What would you consider the most successful movements in U.S. history?
8-hour workday. Yes, that's why people, don't think that came from protests.
Is the 8-hour workday a good thing?
An 8-hour workday is a good thing because people used to work 16 to 20 hours. They used to work whatever amount of time the employer wanted them to work. And see, that's why I was saying basic things like that we take for granted, and we don't realize that the 8-hour workday was in law in the 1860s. But in practice, it didn't take place till the 1900s. People had to protest to make it a reality. You had people in the street. You had strikes. You had work shortages or slowdowns. You had work stoppages. And my book is about there are many ways in which to protest. We don't think of Rosa Parks with a bullhorn in the street with a sign, but her protest was internationally known and effective all the same. So for that mother talking to that young person, just think protest doesn't have to be just out in the street. It could be a singular decision not to buy at a certain store. That's protest. So I look at it, somebody wants to take a knee. That's protest. That's an individual part or could be part of a group. And if we expand the idea of protest, it can involve more people and do more things. You don't have to go out into the street. That's not the way it has to be.
Is that what you think people are getting wrong about protest?
I think people are getting wrong about protests. One, they get a lot of things wrong, not thinking there's a strategy to it. Mm-hmm. And you think that you do the TV version of protests because people look at the last protest and they see the change. They think the last protest did it. They don't think of all the years of protest leading up to it. Mm-hmm. Because in the TV version, You have the problem, then you have the protest. You have the dark night of the soul where the protest doesn't work, then the next night it does, and now people are happy, and that's the end of the show. And so they don't show that the other side is saying, we're going to take this ground back you just took from us. The ground you took is mine.
I think it would be interesting to just like go through the strategy of a single protest, like the non-TV version of it.
Okay. The coal workers' strike was based on the fact that the corporations, the train barons, and the coal company barons, and they used the word barons back then because they were basically taking from the European models. They would come here and with the same mindset, many of them, of serfdom, that the worker is a serf. And at the time in Europe, the serf was connected to the land. That's why you get that word landlord. Because, yes, they were lord of the land. It became the version in the South of sharecropping, where the farmer would get, a little part of what they produced, and the lion's share of it would go to the plantation owner. And so what we have now are people who are working in the coal mines. They find this massive amount of coal in the mountains of West Virginia. And so there's no 8-hour work day. They work them as long as they need to work them. They're going into these dangerous conditions, and people are dying. People are losing a limb. But the corporation owns the land. They own the homes. They own the schools. They own the church. The corporations own the stores. And so the people who are working there are paid in what there's called scripts. They're a piece of paper. It's not real money. It's a piece of paper with the company's name on it. Say it's $10. And then you go to the company store. And then the company store, which is owned by the corporation, then, writes down how much you bought at the company store and takes it off of the script and writes it down how much you now owe. From the rent, from the store, from clothes, the worker had nothing. So the workers want to join unions. They want to become united and have a power to sit at the table and decide certain things. So they wanted to renegotiate their wages. And to do that individually, they would have, they call yellow dog contracts. And in the contract, it said you could not, negotiate your wage. You could not be part of a union. And if you did, you would be evicted from your home. And so what they had to do, they had someone named Mother Jones. And Mother Jones was this little, she's like a little grandmother, this little white-haired white woman who would with this fierce voice. And she would tell them, get together, everybody come together. So you had this strategy of how much money we should make. What should be the union? How can we bring in somebody from outside to help organize us? Then you have this union organizer in Mother Jones. So you have all these things coming together, but you also had people who were not going to allow that to happen. So folks were evicted. And once they were evicted, they would live in a tent. But then the corporation owned the land where the tents were, so they were evicted from the tents. So you had, that's why you had a high price paid in order for them to continue to have union organizers. But because unions were in other parts of the country, outside people came in to help them organize their unions. So you had pressure from the outside. You had lobbying of federal government to recognize the unions and recognize the ability to have a union. You think about that, and you can apply that to what happened in the civil rights movement, because a lot of the civil rights movement was based on the structure of what happened with labor organizing.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, so at the beginning of July, I saw these aerial views of Philadelphia. Their sanitation workers were on strike, and the streets were full of trash, and it was massive and everywhere. What did you think about that?
I used to live in Philadelphia, and I lived in Philadelphia during a trash strike.
How'd it go?
Rats were everywhere.
Right.
They were jumping out of baskets. On my way home, you had to dodge things. Yes, it was bad. And, once again, what is it doing? Disrupting. Yeah. It's making you stop your day-to-day going and back and forth to whatever you're doing to say, pay attention to this issue over here. And so now you have this standoff. How long are people going to go without wages? Part of what I say in my book is my father was part of a protest. And when he protested, they were out so long, we lost our house. Yes, we lost our house. He got another job in the end and worked his way up, and he's passed on now. But he ended up getting back on his feet and all of that. But yes, you can have devastating economic effects. I'm not trying to gloss this over at all. Yeah. People can get arrested. The police can be, accused of assault. In many instances, those people who are out protesting will have economic effects. That is part of it too.
But when you see firsthand what the cost of protest looks like, what do you take from that when you see something like that happen with your dad?
I think about the courage. These people put their lives and livelihoods on the line. They wanted something that was beyond just their individual needs. And so whether or not they're fighting for clean water or for better schools or for higher wages, they're going to be fighting for something that will not entail 100% of people. Because protests are usually just a fraction of the people involved, yet the whole group gets the benefit. Sometimes I ask the people, you want to be a freedom freeloader? Because we have a lot of freedom freeloaders who don't want to do anything except reap the benefits of other people putting themselves on the line. But it's always been that way.
Golly.
So that's why a lot of people go, well, why isn't everybody there? It's never been everyone there, if that's proper English. Mm-hmm. It's always just been a fraction of people who have made the difference when it comes to protesting.
So what happens when you fight the good fight and it doesn't go your way?
How can we lose? This was something very important. This was necessary. Didn't they understand? This was to help our education.
That's coming up. Stay with us.
This comes from NPR sponsor Sierra. No matter the industry, how businesses connect with customers defines their brand. And today, connection starts with a conversation. Sierra is the AI platform for businesses that want to provide better, more human customer experiences. With Sierra, your AI agent solves problems fast. No canned responses, no endless hold music, no frustration. Just better customer experiences built on Sierra. Visit sierra.ai to learn more. This message comes from NPR sponsor HP. Easily search through personal files, gain valuable insights, and make smarter, more informed business decisions. Unlock the future of work today with the HP AI PC. With the right tools, work doesn't have to feel like work. To learn more, go to hp.com/AI PC. Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. This message comes from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, recognizing extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence. More information on this year's MacArthur Fellows is at macfound.org.
Parker.
Gene.
Code Switch. I've been talking to Professor Gloria J. Brown Marshall about her book, A Protest History of the United States. And she told me that one thing that stood out to her in her research was the importance of young people in protests.
So many high school students have played major roles in protests. They haven't recently because so many people refuse to give young people their due as far as effective protesters. They became effective during George Floyd because older people like myself who had respiratory issues or whatever couldn't protest as much as we would have. And so that gave the entree for young people to take their true role. But protests are usually by the young. Mm-hmm. They have the time to read the issues, but they also have the type of jobs that would allow them to protest. And the children's marches, for example, during the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King had children, high school students, because if the parents marched and they lost their job, the whole family would lose their income. Mm-hmm. And so they would have high school students participating or college students participating in sit-ins and marches.
That's why they protesting at night. They got get out of
I
school. You got things to
know.
do. Do you remember? You write about it in the book, but I wanted you to say, do you remember your first protest?
I remember my first protest. I was in grade school, and this was during the time period in which a lot of white parents were taking their kids out of school and moving to the suburbs. I didn't understand any of this. All I knew was they wanted to pass what they called a levy, a tax levy. I wasn't even sure what a tax levy was. All I knew was that we needed the tax money to sustain the school. I didn't know as a child that, working people dislike taxes. I had no clue. But we went to the streets and we had our little sign, vote for the levy. And I had a little sign, vote for the levy to save our school. Vote for the levy, we're depending on you. And so, yes, no, now you know I didn't go into singing. And so I wrote the little song and we were there. We were marching the street with our signs and everything like that. And the levy did not pass. We did not have the taxes to sustain the school system with all of the people who had like the higher incomes leaving, the school district after Brown versus Board of Education. This wasn't right after Brown. Thank you very much for anybody trying to add stuff up. So,
This was post 1950.
Thank you. This was not in the 50s at all. Thank you very much for folks going on Google already. But but what really got me about losing was just what you said, that feeling. How could we lose?
Yeah.
This was something very important. This was necessary. Didn't they understand? This was to help our education. This was a good thing. So that was my first time going all in on a protest as a little kid, not understanding, not being mature enough to realize all the different levels of what was going on at the time. And that's why I said a lot of the young people were the ones who had the opportunity to study these things, the high school students, the college students, to study the issues, the different layers of the issues, and not just go out emotionally and protest, but think of the strategies based on what they were actually protesting against. Some of the anti-war protests, very successful protests, because those college students studied the Vietnam War. They understood what they were protesting against. They knew what the votes were. They knew how the money was being spent. They knew what the body counts were. So they would use that in their protest, in trying to change the hearts and minds of people in positions of power and the presidency. I mean, Lyndon Johnson did not run for a second term because of the Vietnam War and the protests against the war. And high school students, U.S. Supreme Court case, the Tinkers case, is high school students protesting silently. They wore an armband to school as a protest of the Vietnam War. So there are so many ways in which people have protested. But I think it's important for us to understand the issues that we're battling against and what it's going to take that would allow us to have substantive change. So that when you have the 2 steps forward, when you have that 1 step back, the 1 step back is not so deep that it's devastating.
Golly, I'm thinking about when reading that in your book. When I was a kid and my first protest didn't go well, that would have devastated me and dissuaded me. But then I remembered my first protest as a teenager, long before I was a journalist. Please note that. It didn't go well. It didn't work in the way that I wanted it to. And as you were saying that, I wasn't dissuaded as a young person from protesting.
I think it's very important to know that protesting does give a sense of power. We've been thwarted and our rights undermined for most of the time in this country. So to say, I'm so disheartened by this past election that I can't do anything else is to negate all the history and all of our ancestral work that fought in the face of crooked elections, fought in the face of denial of the right to vote, lynchings based on the right to vote. Look at the nation's history.
It feels like this country has been in this perpetual state of protest since maybe 2020, maybe earlier 2017. Does what we're looking at right now seem to be working, or have you seen it shift?
I've seen a shift because I haven't seen the use of strategy the way it was used previously. And there's an impatience. This is the 21st century. People don't want to re-protest what was already protested and won, So consider the Montgomery bus boycott was in 1955. We gained the civil rights legislation in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And so many lives were lost, so many people were assaulted, so many protests happened during that time period of 1955 to 1965. But people want the TV version, and they want to see the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in
Summer
in
protests
March.
happened and it was all done.
And
Everything
it was all
fixed.
done. It was
I saw that
1965. Yeah, you saw the movie Selma?
We heard them say we don't deserve to be here. But today, we stand as Americans.
It's like, and you even get a theme song.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day.
So I think that there's much more to it because we're in a nation that began with this kind of, dual personality of stating we want liberty while on stolen indigenous land and kidnapped African people. So there's always been this conflict between what's been stated as liberty and freedom and what's actually been given. So perpetual protest, I would agree with that. The Enemy Aliens Act was something that was passed by federal legislation in the 1700s. So we had just gotten to be a country when they started to limit the protest rights of immigrants. So that's why I'm telling you, once you look at the history of it and you realize this is something that's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's 2 necessary steps. Necessary, or else you're always going backwards. That's why it's so important to understand that protest is a necessary part of our work. I think what's missing as well is it's not that the people before were naive. Yes, they wanted to just live their life. I think they believed in rest as well. Rest didn't just start in the 21st century. So they wanted to rest. But they decided to use their honest rage in ways that would be progressive for the community, for their families, and for the future. And I think that's something I want people to understand, that folks before weren't just so giving of their time and money and energy that they didn't think about anything else. They wanted to be with their families. They wanted to enjoy their lives too. But they also knew there was something bigger than themselves that they needed to be a part of. And that's why we have the rights and protections we have today, because they protested. Those rights were on the paper, just like the 8-hour workday was on the paper in 1800s. But the protests made them a reality that we today can take for granted.
Yeah.
So I think we need to think about and look at the future. And are we going to be freedom freeloaders? Or are we going to invest in a future in which there are people who gain rights and protections based on our work, the same way we gain them based on other people's work?
On that note, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Parker.
So Gloria J. Brown Marshall talked about the history of protest, but I wanted to talk to someone as well who is on the ground at current protests and could talk to our listener Katie's concern about what's going on right now. So I called up the news and politics editor at Teen Vogue, Lex McMenamin. They've been covering protests for years, and they said while protests are often messy and incomplete, they've definitely seen reasons for hope. Reasons that aren't always easy to pick up from afar. Lex reflected on the 2020 uprisings that happened after George Floyd was killed and during the height of the COVID pandemic.
And so, just like everyone else, my family was suffering. I was in a really terrible position in 2020, and it wasn't like just being at home bored all the time. It was like there were real material conditions that were, not only impacting me directly, but my friends, my communities. Things were really difficult. And so part of what was so fascinating to me about how the 2020 uprisings for George Floyd and the movement for Black Lives was covered was as these scary, violent, terrifying, need to call in the National Guard for safety purposes rhetoric that obviously Trump and no shortage of other politicians and public figures used, when in reality they were often extremely joyous. They were opportunities to make public art. There were dance battles, more mutual aid, food handouts. I got so much free stuff during those protests. One of the best reusable masks I had ever had in my life I got at a George Floyd protest in D.C.
Lex also talked about some of the tangible results that have come out of those and other protests.
I mean, I have a list of some things that are actual wins that are going on in the last couple years.
Please, Lex, give it to me.
Just in the last 6 months or whatever, the Tesla takedown movement has completely targeted Elon's pockets, quite effectively. You've seen it in how Tesla is trending, for example. So that's one thing where it's that's not necessarily what I think protesters would necessarily highlight as the movement, but it's a way in which people are trying to connect with each other to target someone that has a role in this administration right now. But more traditionally, after Trump's executive order in January around hospitals providing gender-affirming care, which people have suggested is an attempt to lay the groundwork for adult-level gender-affirming care bans, several hospitals across the country preemptively complied and announced they would stop providing gender-affirming care for trans youth. But protests that happened in various cities across the country actually got some of those hospitals to reverse their decisions on that and continue providing care, which truly is life-saving healthcare. And so even if that's 10 kids, right, that are able to continue seeing their doctors, that's 10 kids who are going to make it to 25 maybe and get to be people after this, not just statistics. Once again, the idea is the protest is the one-time thing that can bring you in. The rest of your life is how you keep actually enacting the protest beyond just that one day. So use it as an opportunity. Figure out a way to do something that maybe sounds fun to you. Maybe it's making art for the next protest. There's only 1,000 million ways that we can find little ways to fight back.
Lex, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's our show. You can follow us on Instagram at NPR Code Switch. If email is more your thing, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Code Switch newsletter by going to npr.org/codeswitchnewsletter.
And just a reminder that signing up for Code Switch Plus is a great way to support our show and to support public media. And you get to listen to every episode with no sponsors. So please go find out more at plus.npr.org/codeswitch. This episode you're listening to was produced by Xavier Lopez. It was edited by Leah Donnella, and our engineer was Jimmy Keeley.
And a big shout out to the rest of the Code Switch massive. Christina Kala, Jess Kung, Courtney Stein, Dahlia Mortada, and Verilyn Williams.
I'm Gene Demby.
I'm B.A. Parker.
Be easy.
Hydrate.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. If you're tired of spending hundreds on big wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks, Mint Mobile might be right for you with plans starting from $15 a month. Shop plans today at mintmobile.com/switch. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Capella University. Interested in a quality online education? Capella is accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.